From childhood, the mere glimpse of a red nose and exaggerated makeup sent shivers down my spine. I don't remember exactly when it started, but even if you don't have a phobia, you have to admit they're, at the very least, strange painted faces, loud, and all the rest. Throughout my life, I had managed to avoid encountering one most of the time, whether it be at circuses, birthday parties, or even at that fast food chain. Fortunately, they've already removed the clown from their marketing. It was my safety bubble, but now that bubble had been burst, like a balloon pricked with a needle. I was there, having my coffee, ready to head to work, when my doorbell rang. Damn, who could it be so early? I thought. I'm coming. I got up, still stumbling, and walked to the door. Upon opening it, however, I saw no one. I looked around at the empty street, but there was no one in sight. The morning dew left the air slightly chilly. I was about to close the door when I noticed something on the ground. A small white rectangular paper delicately placed on my doormat. I picked up the paper, curious, but when I turned it over, I almost had a meltdown. And I definitely did when my mind processed what it was. A clown. I know, it's just a photo, you must be thinking, but it wasn't just a photo. That figure, with red hair and a toothy grin, was holding a balloon, posing in front of my house. It was taken at night, but even so, with the street light, I could recognize the location. He was on my lawn while pointing with his free hand to my window. Reluctantly, I walked to the window and pulled the curtains slowly. The lawn was empty, no sign of the clown. I went to work, somewhat disturbed, and during my shift, I couldn't get it out of my head. Every time I looked out the office window, half expecting to see that sinister smile staring back at me from outside. My mind wandered between trying to rationalize what was happening and imagining it was some kind of prank, and the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, that clown was real. A mix of fear and paranoia consumed me as I tried to focus on work tasks. However, the hours dragged on, and the day finally came to an end. I returned home with a knot in my stomach, hoping it was all just some kind of sick joke. But upon opening the door to my house, what I found made me freeze in place. There was another photo. This time, it had been placed through the letter slot of the door, lying on the cold wooden floor of the living room. My heart hammered hard in my chest as I approached the image. It was even more disturbing than the previous one. The clown was now in front of the door. It wasn't a smile, but rather an exaggerated expression of surprise, mouth wide open, being covered by one of its hands. Eyes widened, and as I lowered my gaze to the bottom, it was written in bold, straight letters, almost mechanical, "Knock knock." The words seemed to jump out of the image, echoing in my mind like a sinister mantra. My breath grew heavier. My heart felt like it wanted to jump out of my mouth. I didn't know what to do. Call the police? And say what? That there was a creepy clown harassing me with photos of my lawn? Yeah, it sounds like a joke indeed. I decided to call my girlfriend Jenny and tell her a bit about the situation. At first, she thought it was a prank, but I think my genuine panic convinced her. We stayed on the line until she got home, quickly entering while I looked around the lawn. "And so, what's going on?" she asked. I showed her the images. She examined the photos with a serious and worried expression, and I could feel her hand trembling slightly as she held the phone. "This is disturbing," she muttered. "Maybe we should call the police?" "And what can they do? It's just a guy taking pictures on the street and sending them to me." Jenny sighed. clearly concerned about the situation. I know, but it's not normal, right? What if it's someone trying to scare you on purpose? We can't just ignore this. She was right. No matter how irrational it seemed, it was deeply affecting me. I could no longer feel safe in my own home. We then decided to call the police and report the incident. I explained the situation as best as I could, but still felt like they didn't take it very seriously. Within an hour, a patrol car came to us, and 2 officers searched the house, checking all the doors and windows and asking some questions about the events. However, they found nothing out of the ordinary besides the photos. After the police left, Jenny suggested that perhaps it would be a good idea to install security cameras around the house, just as a precaution. I agreed. In the following days, life seemed to return to normal. The security cameras were installed, but they didn't capture anything out of the ordinary. I was starting to convince myself that it had all been a sick joke, until one morning I woke up to find the security cameras on the counter, their wires shredded, and the words, "Only I take pictures here," written on the back of another photo. This time, the clown was inside the house. The image showed the clown on my couch, with a finger pressed to its lips in a gesture of silence. The background of the photo was familiar, the living room. I began to tremble, my legs weakening, forcing me to sit down. Gradually, my breathing intensified, making each breath more difficult. "This can't be happening," I murmured to myself. I called my workplace, informing them that I wouldn't be coming in today, and I sent a message to Jenny, letting her know that I would be going there to spend a few days until I could find another place to stay. I was finishing typing the message to her when a click, followed by a wave of light, flooded the kitchen. I stood still, not even my breath making me move. I turned around, already expecting what I would see. The clown, at the top of the stairs, facing away from me. He held a camera facing in my direction, as if taking a selfie. The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity as I watched the half of his body that was visible, with the other half blocked by the wall. His hair waved at the ends and stood up in a very strange shade of red, even for a clown. I swallowed hard, fighting against the panic that threatened to engulf me whole. My eyes remained fixed on the figure of the clown, paralyzed by terror. The click of the camera reverberated in my mind, and now it was followed by the sound of printing. I could see a small piece of paper, like the others from the photos, coming out of an opening in the camera and falling to the ground. He was still facing away from me when I realized I didn't have time to grab my things. With trembling hands, I slowly approached the keys, terrified at the thought of the clown turning around at any moment. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it wanted to escape my chest. I stood up, trying not to make noise, and walked slowly to the door without taking my eyes off him. My fingers trembled as I tried to turn the doorknob, and for a moment, it seemed like the door was stuck, as if the universe was conspiring against my escape. Finally, with a soft click, the door opened, revealing the outside world as a tempting refuge. I was about to leave when I noticed the gradual movement of the terrifying figure turning around to look at me. His eye met mine, glowing with disturbing intensity, his face still partially covered. The macabre smile was present, cutting through the clown's pale face. A wave of terror ran through my body as I found myself trapped in the mesmerizing gaze of that sinister figure. Suddenly, his hand covered by a white glove slowly rose, and then, raising his index finger, he shook it, making a no sign. I found myself unable to respond, my throat closing with paralyzing fear. In a last act of desperation, I turned and ran through the door. I ran to my car, the cold air cutting my face, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. The feeling that something was following me haunted me at every corner, making me check the rearview mirrors at every strange sound. Finally, I arrived at Jenny's house, knocking frantically on the door and begging to be let in. We called the police again, this time desperate, begging for help. They promised to investigate, but I already know they won't find anything. It's been a week, and during these days, I stayed at Jenny's house. Everything has been normal. I told my boss I caught a flu and have been avoiding leaving the house as much as possible. Sometimes, at night, when I'm about to close my eyes, I have the feeling that something is lurking in the shadows of the room, patiently waiting for me. Luckily, they've always been false alarms. This morning, however, Jenny left for work, but before she even closed the door, she came back, a wide-eyed look on her face. She held a white envelope, and her fingers trembled as she extended it towards me. I took it, feeling a chill run down my spine as my eyes fixed on the photo inside. It was a photo of the two of us, taken from the backyard, through the window. We were sitting on the couch, laughing, watching a movie last night. But in the foreground, right in the corner of the photo, there was only a piece of a figure that I knew very well who it was. Those strands of red hair and the pale skin with black eyes could only belong to my nightmare. Now, the two of us are held up at home, trying to buy tickets out of town to escape this madness as soon as possible. However, what tortures us as we hug in the room is the sound of an old children's toy echoing through the house. "He's coming for you." That's what the formerly demon-possessed man said. He meant it for everyone, but he pointed at just one person, me. Lending gravity to his infernal tale of woe was the pentagram tattoo on his neck and the sixes across all of his knuckles. Pastor Cam introduced him as an ex-devil worshiper named Pat. Pat looked, however, like he'd lied about giving up Satan. Finding Christ came with a wardrobe change and a makeover. No, he paced the orange carpet in the musty church basement, leaving dark footprints from the dirt on his motorcycle boots. I watched my mom try to kill herself with our old furnace. He didn't explain how. Having limited knowledge of furnaces, I pictured someone cramming their body into a fiery opening. A demon appeared to me on the basement stairs as I listened to heavy metal and took drugs. The vague way he referenced the music and his altered state made him less convincing. He sounded like an after-school special or PSA between cartoons on a Saturday. I couldn't touch a Bible or look at one. Going inside a church burned my skin. Since we were in one, I assumed his discomfort had ended. Throwing a Bible at him and yelling, "Catch," would probably be frowned upon. Chelsea wouldn't like it. Coming back to the youth group on Fridays had been her idea. I took it as a prerequisite and a condition of our carnal relationship, which had begun a week ago at school. We kissed at the dance, and I almost touched her bra. It had gone no further than that. She worried for our eternal souls. I wasn't sure we had any, but didn't want to pressure her and become the known creep of the community. Christians are funny because they give themselves the option to repent and be redeemed. They do all the things they think they shouldn't. It wasn't the atheist girls having premarital sex and babies. A paradox that worked for an opportunistic asshole like a teenage boy. So I agreed to come and even thought Pat might be interesting when the youth pastor announced the guest speaker of the night. He seemed confused and mentally ill. I felt sorry for him, and then I was impatient. We were going to the fast food burger joint I don't need to name because you know it and have probably eaten there. You'll understand why I don't name it. I don't want any legal trouble. Satan is real, Pat said, leading to a final statement. He's real. He takes many forms. Your father, your mom, your brothers, Yogi Bear, Super Mario. You'll know it's the devil when he's coming for you. That's when he pointed at me and breathed heavily, wheezing almost, and my face became uncomfortably warm from the unexpected scrutiny in the room. I smiled and looked for support, but everyone looked worried. "Thank you, Pat," Pastor Cam said, clapping a few times and then giving up when the silent tension would not relent. Pat sat down in the back row of chairs. The pastor started a prayer to conclude the evening. I snuck a look at Pat and found him staring right at me. He looked sweaty and trembled with a secret delight revealed only by the hint of a smile. I quickly looked away. "Amen," the pastor concluded. "Have a good night, kids. Be safe." We milled around for a few moments, confirming plans to meet up at that burger place. I tried to keep an eye out for Pat because the dude was clearly fixated on me. I do have a tendency to wear my thoughts on my face. He probably noticed I wasn't buying his crazy story fragments. He remained in the back row seats. He hadn't stopped watching me. I shrugged at him like, "What the hell?" Chelsea tugged my arm and I looked away. "Come on, we're going." I acknowledged her with a nod. In the brief distraction, Pat disappeared. What a joke. He was trying to scare me. Too bad I couldn't convince myself he hadn't. The night turned frosty. Paul, the weird kid, fidgety as the formerly possessed, made the lame joke about smoking, posing his fingers and breathing asthmatically. Nobody laughed. The crunch of boots on a thin layer of snow marked a grim journey to that burger place. It was too cold for etiquette. As the seven of us crossed the street from church to the edge without a sidewalk, the streetlight above went out. We didn't remark on it until we left the vicinity of predicted illumination. It went back on. "Spooky," Paul said, laughing like he'd told another joke. It became spooky when we reached the next streetlight. It went out too. We stopped, uncertain what to make of the mildly interesting phenomenon. Chelsea took my hand and squeezed. "Let's keep going. It's cold." More like, "Let's keep going because I'm scared." I didn't mind, so long as she kept holding on to me. Again, the light resumed when we were outside its casted glow. The next block contained mostly mud and unfinished houses from some development gone sour. Streetlights here were fewer, only 2. Yet they were enough to unnerve us with sudden malfunctions. "This is too weird," Paul said. He wasn't laughing anymore. His dumb face looked thoughtful. "Can we try something? Leave one at a time?" "No and no," I said, moving along and inadvertently cooperating. I was the only one to go. Chelsea had stopped holding my hand, and I guess I'd been distracted by the mystery lights. The circular bugle of electric sight blessed the 6 still beneath it. "It's you," Paul accused, without regret and more than a little delight. I was an outsider to the youth group. Chelsea had stopped going to the church before I met her. None of the boys were happy to see her return with a new guy. "Sure it is," I said, unnerved and trying not to show it. Let's go. The group started moving. Chelsea touched my arm. Go back to the light. What? Go back. I want to see. Come on, can we? I want to see, she insisted. Fine. I marched back to the light and started thrashing, gripping my throat. It burns. It burns. Oh, the pain. The others laughed. Chelsea did not. Nothing happened to the streetlight. It stayed on. When the next one went out, nobody commented, and we kept walking. On Rockchurch Road, there were no streetlights until that burger place, and those were already flickering. A lot of the restaurants had undergone extensive renovations to appear more like coffee shops. Not this one, though. This one looked forgotten in the midst of a developer's hell. Fields of mud surrounded it, staked out for houses that hadn't even started construction. More remnants from economic stagflation. We were only going to that burger place because it was within walking distance. Plus, it was on the way home for both Chelsea and I. Now that we'd arrived, however, I didn't feel like going in. Want to go home instead? I asked her. She frowned. Fellowship with Christians is important. I relented, of course, and tried to pass off the suggestion as a joke. She didn't look like she bought it. Inside, Pastor Cam surprised us with soft-serve cones on his youth pastor's salary. 21 cones for $21. The bulk of the youth group had traveled by car. I was glad for the free ice cream. I only had $5 in my wallet, enough for one happy meal. Fortunately, the cone sufficed for Chelsea. The deep-fried air felt thick, heavy. Breathing, it couldn't be calorie-wise. A number of track lights had spent bulbs, creating a dull atmosphere, punctuated obnoxiously with blue pools of sterile illumination. We in the shadows looked ill. Those beneath the stark light appeared insane. All of us struggled to sit comfortably on hard plastic benches and chairs. I hated that burger place in general. This one, in case my description wasn't clear, I loathed. I tried not to look like I wanted to leave. We took a table at the end and observed the cavorting teens. They told jokes and shot spitballs, while a tired-looking employee appealed to the pastor for proper behavior. I agreed with the employee. The group was full of awkward nerds bound by vague religious ideas. Outside of the church, at school, they were quiet outcasts. I preferred them that way. Even Chelsea seemed embarrassed. Could be worse, I whispered. Could be other people here. Aside from the employees, which were few, I only saw 2. Our youth group members were the only patrons. I jumped when that changed. A heavy thud against the window presented 2 oversized white gloves. That clown, that one, stared at us. The one you're thinking of. The trademarked man with red hair and a maw of grinning crimson. He belonged to that burger place, ideologically, but had no business appearing in the flesh at a random franchise in the middle of the night. No cars but Pastor Cam's were in the parking lot. That clown arrived on foot. The group, the employee too, watched as he grinned and pressed his nose against the glass, which frosted quickly to obscure and distort his colorful features into something sinister. Before I could act on the urge to tell the employee to lock the door, that clown flung it open, creating a vacuum that sucked the breath from the dining area. With his big shoes, he stomped into our midst, aggressively shrouded sweat steaming from his skin. Heat emanated from him, and an anger fixed his expression permanently into revulsion. An attack was imminent, I was sure. But then, he saw me. Latent rage became further buried under a lazy smile. He extended his glove to shake, and with the other, dug around in his yellow coveralls presenting a limp balloon, a prize for my expected camaraderie. I shook my head. No thanks. He handled the rejection well and spun away to the others, who found an unexpected clown in the night more fascinating than scary. Paul shook his hand enthusiastically and looked at me like he'd won a race. That clown looked too, and every time he got a handshake from another. Even Pastor Cam thought it was funny. He quickly accepted the balloons, stuffing them into his jean pocket. Chelsea accepted his hand reluctantly and simply put the flaccid balloon on the table beside her napkins. I could see the employee on his phone talking about that clown to a manager, probably. Nobody expected or wanted a clown in the night. When he offered his hand to me again, his mouth was open slightly, as if he were out of breath. All this time, he hadn't said a word. That nobody found that weird speaks to the quality of the company. Shake his hand, Paul encouraged. Come on. That clown waited. I crossed my arms. I would not relent. Shake his hand, Pastor Cam said, starting a chorus of shake it, shake it, shake it. Centered out, I began to feel the pressure to just give in and move on with life. But then I looked into his eyes. What color are that clown's eyes? I bet you don't know and never did. I do, however. I learned that night, and I'll never forget. No, I said, maybe a little too loudly. The chant stopped. He didn't move, though. Neither did the white glove. I'm not shaking your hand. Now piss off. It was the send-off that incurred the vocal disapproval of the group. Pastor Cam started some admonishment I couldn't make out with all the noise. I stood up and pushed by the clown. I'm going, I told Chelsea. You coming? Because she hesitated, I quite unfairly left her behind. I left my girlfriend at that burger place and regretted it before reaching the end of the parking lot. When I turned around, she was leaving that burger place with another group of kids. I think she saw me. She wouldn't acknowledge my presence, though. I was too much of a stubborn idiot to apologize in front of others. I began the long walk home alone. It was 40 minutes along Rock Church Road to my neighborhood, but longer to my house because of the forest remnant on the south side blocking the park. Walking through the woods at night? No thanks. I planned to pass the forest via Gorth Street, the only intersection with vehicular access to my survey. Apparently, the closed design made the area crime-proof. Plenty of houses still got robbed, however. The thieves just came on foot. The stretches between streetlights were long. I stepped into the first with the expectation that it might snuff out. When it didn't, I felt relieved and focused on a real problem: how to apologize to Chelsea and get her back. Passing beyond another row of unfinished houses, the land opened into fields gone wild. These were farms about 10 years ago, bought up by hopeful developers, but never put to use. The next closest structure ahead was the namesake of the road. Rock Church no longer held services, and the old stone walls had crumbled into ruin. Still, the freezing wind had nothing stopping it. My ears and fingertips burned. As a cool person, I rarely wore a hat and mitts. Stopping within the dark hollow of the abandoned church to warm up seemed like a good idea. I huddled into the corner of 2 remaining walls and breathed into my cupped hands. That's when I saw the first streetlight, where the houses ended and the road split the fields, turn off. I squinted through a fresh swath of flurries. Watery eyes blurred my vision. I couldn't see very far. The streetlight blinked back to life. I continued watching. Uncertainty became full-blown fear when, a few moments later, the next streetlight snuffed out. I stood up feeling trapped in the corner of the ruined church. Silently, I cursed the frozen grass as my shoes crunched to the sidewalk. Like an idiot in a horror movie, I tried looking back and walking at the same time. These sidewalks were older than my dad and never maintained. An edge from the undulating slabs of concrete caught my heel. Down I went, and the next closest streetlight shut off. They were near. I saw limbs stalking, flailing, walking with an unfortunately familiar intensity. He stepped into the lit pool I'd spilled onto, snuffing it out. I scrambled backward and failed to get up as the shadow loomed. I shut my eyes, and his breath coated my face, the grease-laden air of that burger place. "Leave me alone," I whimpered. When the foul stench relented, I forced myself to look. He hadn't left, and the streetlight came back. That clown held out his glove for a handshake. Sweat had smeared his makeup. The red rim around his mouth dribbled like blood onto his yellow jumpsuit. The swell of light around us began to diminish and flicker. He blinked rapidly, in time, and I knew he willfully powered the streetlight as if such a creature could not exist long where others could see. It offered its hand. It only wanted a handshake. I reached to obey, even when I knew it wasn't true. Much more would be given if I relented. Maybe everything. "No," I said quietly. That clown crouched lower and pushed the glove under my nostrils. Writhing worms rippled beneath the fabric, scarcely containing the stench of decay. Burger meat, not worms. Moving strands of ground beef roiled into form, held by an idea, some acknowledgement given by the reluctant handshakes of the living. I can't say where these ideas came from, except possibly that clown itself. I'm just not that creative or depressed. "Shake my hand," it said without moving its slightly parted lips. The voice, it should be noted, was nothing like the real thing. It was deeper and raspy, almost like a whisper, with the last syllable drawn out until the increasing snowfall absorbed the sound. "Shake it. Shake my hand. No, leave me alone." For a moment, it froze. Then, it opened its mouth fully to allow a purplish tongue to unfurl over rotted teeth. Yellowish mountain dew tears drove canals through white makeup cheeks. It wept and looked to the waning streetlight above. "You must shake my hand," it said again, without air, without lungs. When its gaze returned to me, I saw the color of its eyes once more. Death was the price of resistance. I knew it. The light went out. That clown could no longer maintain its camouflage, so it had to return to its natural habitat, the dark. Without the oppression of a horrific visual, my instincts to survive seemed to reboot. I scrambled backward and turned into a flat-out sprint down Rockchurch. Shadowy trees swayed invitingly in the distance. I could be home in 5 minutes, maybe less, if I cut through the woods. Another extinguished light behind me obliterated any hesitancy to go in there. Secret skeletal branches threatened to impede my escape, but when the stench of that clown increased, I screamed and flailed and defied the call to stop and shake that fucking clown's hand. My sense of where my house stood failed me. I popped out of the woods on Rockchurch again. That clown showed itself with the briefest ignition of the nearest streetlight. It laughed, or I did, as I despaired, into madness. The forest wasn't so large. I picked a point ahead, a porch light, and went for it. I was so close. I could see the failure of the trees to stand against the encroaching homes, and the park no one seemed to use. Its footsteps closed fast. Velvety fingertips lightly grazed the back of my neck. "Oh shit. God, help," I ranted. We fell at the same time. I from its barest touch, and the acceptance of being unable to continue running, it from some chance infirmity in the ground or something more divine. I opened my eyes. That clown lay over a narrow tree stump, impaled beneath its ribs and stuck. It writhed, a bulbous insect pinned by the collector, confused by circumstances it could not understand. True blood overwhelmed the red makeup mouth and stained the light snow. I got to my feet, waiting to see it die. That clown's glove shot out toward me. I flinched, and when I looked back, it was looking at me, no longer fearsome, but sad, pathetic. Unbelievably, I felt pity for that clown. Even after it had chased me and grossed me out with its smell and freakish body, I began to wish it hadn't come to impalement. It was relief found in hindsight. I know because I strongly regret what I did next. I knelt by the clown to pray. I'd never prayed before. I didn't believe in God, so this was pretty dumb. As his breath ran out and the eyes stared at the world beyond, I did the only thing left I could think of to honor that clown. I took its limp hand in mine and finally gave in. That clown died, and I left its body. No police came knocking. No news stories were written or shared on social media. I know why now. Because I shook its hand. And now I can't touch the Bible. And the church burns like Pat said it would.